Okay, guys, so today we're gonna go over Unidad Uno and Libro Uno. This one is called Saludos y Despedidas. In this unit, we will learn how to greet somebody according to the time of day. We're also going to learn to ask somebody for his or her name and also to say our name. We're going to ask somebody how he or she is and say how you are. We're going to learn how to say goodbye as well, and we're going to learn the alphabet. Okay? So the first thing that we're going to start with Diálogo Uno. All right? So let's just listen to it together.
Saludos. Hola, me llamo Fernando.
Hola, me llamo Teresa.
Hola, me llamo Eduardo.
Hola, me llamo Conchita.
Hola, me llamo Paquito.
Buenos días.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas noches.
Okay, so as we see, everybody introduced themselves. Fernando said, hola, me llamo Fernando. Teresa said, hola, me llamo Teresa. Eduardo, me llamo Eduardo, etc. Paquito and Conchita. As you can see, everybody greeted themselves. They said hola, but they also said me llamo. Me llamo is I call myself. So the word llamo actually comes from the verb llamar. Llamar. Now, note, when there's a double L, I don't say la. I say ya. Ya. So it's llamar. Remember to roll the R's for the ends of the Spanish word. It actually comes from the verb to call. All right. So me llamo is I call myself. All right. As we go along further, we'll go into the conjugation of the verb llamar to give you guys a better understanding as to how it goes. In terms of time of day, we have buenos dias, which is usually used for the morning. Buenas tardes for the afternoon, and buenas noches for the evening or the nighttime. Excuse me. So, as we read here, it says, hola is an informal way of greeting someone. You say hola to your friends and classmates. Buenos dias, buenas tardes, and buenas noches are formal. You use them, let me just highlight that, formal. You use them to address persons that you don't know well, persons to whom you owe respect, and senior citizens, for example, your teacher or your parents. So, whenever you're speaking to somebody in authority and you're greeting them or you're saying hello to them, you usually use a formal greeting. So buenos dias, buenas tardes, or buenas noches. Similarly to English, you know, you walk into a place where you don't know the people, you don't just say, oh, hi. You say, hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So similarly to the way that we greet in English, we greet in Spanish. So as we move on, we come to the second diálogo. So we're just going to listen to it. And then I want you guys to pay attention to as it goes on because we have some more stuff to learn at the end of that.
Track 2.
Diálogo.
Hola, Ramón.
Hola, Eduardo.
¿Qué tal?
Bastante bien, gracias. ¿Y tú?
Bien, gracias.
Okay, so that takes us to the end of dialogue 1.
Track 3.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
¿Cómo está usted?
No muy bien, gracias. ¿Y tú? ¿Cómo estás?
Muy bien, gracias.
All right, so as we see, we have two dialogues between Eduardo and Ramon and Conchita and Senora Emilia. So, as we can see, it says at the bottom, notice the difference between Conchita's question, ¿Cómo está usted? And Emilia's, ¿Cómo estás? Spanish has two ways of saying you. So, tú, note this point, tú is actually, let me see if I can zoom it in a bit. So, tú right here, with the accent, it actually means, it actually is informal and it means you, all right? And is used when you're speaking to a friend, a close family or classmates. You would use usted. Usted is often shortened to UD when you're writing. It's formal. It's used for persons that you don't know well and to who you owe respect. So as we saw previously, people that you owe respect, senior citizens, for example, your teacher, your parents, etc., etc. Okay? As we can see, in terms of asking somebody how they're doing, Eduardo had told Ramon, hola. Hola, Ramon. Hola, Eduardo. Great. We got that part. It's like, hey, hey. Eduardo asked, ¿Qué tal? As we come to the bottom, we see ¿Qué tal actually means how are you? It's an informal way of greeting. In Spanish, there are two major ways that you can greet somebody. You can greet them formally, well, ask them how they're doing formally or informally. Informally, you could say ¿Qué tal? Or you could say ¿Cómo estás tú? ¿Cómo tú estás or ¿Cómo estás tú? As we see, Señora Emilia had actually used ¿Cómo estás? All right? So that's the informal ways. The way to do it formally is by actually saying ¿Cómo está usted? All right? So these two, ¿Qué tal? Number one, and ¿Cómo estás? Number two, are informal greetings. And then we have ¿Cómo está usted? Which is actually the formal greeting. All right? So as we can see, the second thing right there, it says, well, ¿Qué tal? How are you? And ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo está usted? These are greetings. Now, the book says here that this is formal, but the only one that's formal in this one is actually this one right here. These two are actually informal. Okay, so ¿Cómo estás? And ¿Qué tal? These two are informal. We see that a response that can be given is muy bien. So when we go back up to the conversation, we see, let me just erase this real quick. So we see that Conchita had actually asked Señora Emilia, ¿Cómo está usted? You know, how are you? Formally, how are you? She responds by saying, no muy bien, gracias. As we see at the bottom, muy bien actually means very well. So she's saying, I'm not doing very well. I'm not very well. Thank you. And you? And then that's that. For the bastante bien, we go back to the conversation with Ramon and Eduardo. Eduardo had actually said, ¿Qué tal? And Ramon responded, bastante bien, gracias. ¿Y tú? So as we see, when somebody asks you, how are you doing? You can respond by saying, muy bien. You can respond by saying, bastante bien. You can respond by saying, no muy bien. Okay? And you can even also respond, one of the ways in Spanish is if somebody were to ask you a question. Now, as we move forward in the class, we'll get better at this. But when somebody asks you a question, normally they would put a verb in the word. In this case, the verb that's being used is estar. E-S-T-A-R. Okay? So the verb estar is actually conjugated. Let me see if I can get some space to write it down. Is actually conjugated like this. Yo estoy. Tú, remember with the accent it means you. Estás. Now, this one has an accent on the A. We're going to learn a little bit further that you can actually have tú written without an accent. You can have estás written without an accent. And they actually mean different things. All right? Él, ella, usted, abbreviated as UD, está, with the accent, es nosotros, yikes boy, handwriting is terrible, nosotros estamos. Note, estamos does not carry an accent on the A, alright, so that's one way to remember, and there's ellos, ellas, ustedes, están, with the accent on the A. So the question that was proposed is ¿Cómo está usted or ¿Cómo estás tú? In Spanish, when someone generally asks you a question, you identify the verb that is being used. The verb estar means to be. But it's like a temporary state of being or to be located. So normally when somebody asks you how you're doing, because you're not always in that mood, you're not forever happy or you're not forever sad. We use the word estar because how are you temporarily, presently, in this moment? So the verb used there was ¿Cómo está? They said, well, the question was ¿Cómo está? Or ¿Cómo estás? Now in Spanish, generally, when somebody asks you a question using a verb, you respond using your conjugation of that verb. So for example, let's use the ¿Cómo está usted form. ¿Cómo está usted? All right. ¿Cómo está usted? We're using the verb estar. ¿Cómo está usted? That's somebody asking you that. Formally, your response would be by conjugating the verb estar into the personal singular. So you would say yo estoy. All right. Yo estoy bien. yo no estoy bien. You can also say yo in this case. You can say yo no estoy muy bien. All right? Right there you can say yo estoy muy bien. So even if they were to ask you cómo estás or cómo está usted, recognize that the verb being asked is the verb estar. And to respond, you would conjugate it accordingly. So for example, here's another example. If I were to walk in the class and I were to look at all of you guys and I would say, ¿Cómo están ustedes? ¿Cómo están? Remember, I'm talking about you guys, plural. ¿Cómo están? You guys would respond by saying, well, if you're talking now, you're responding back as a group. You say, we are fine. You would use nosotros. Nosotros, and remember, you find the verb is estar. You conjugate estar to the form that corresponds to what you're about to say. So, ¿Cómo están ustedes? You guys would respond, estamos bien. Nosotros estamos bien. O nosotros estamos muy bien. Nosotros estamos regular, etc., etc. So, in Spanish, when somebody asks you a question, generally, the question will be conjugated. The verb in the question, will be conjugated. And then it's now up to you to kind of find what the verb is, kind of figure out, what's the main verb, and then conjugate it accordingly. So, one more time. If I walk in and I say, ¿Cómo estás tú? You would respond by going back to the verb estar. Supposed to be like, what verb is he using? He said, ¿Cómo estás tú? The verb is estar. How do I conjugate estar? Yo estoy. Yo is the singular. So, I am fine. Yo estoy bien. If I say, ¿Cómo están ustedes? I'm asking a group of many people. The group would respond, nosotros, which is we. We are. So, nosotros estamos. Okay? You cannot say, nosotros estoy or nosotros están. That is not correct. That's almost like saying in English, we is or we am. You don't say we am, you don't say we is, you say we are. Okay? Just like you don't say I is or I are, you say I am. So yo estoy, I am. Tú estás, you are. All right? As we move further, we'll get a little bit more into it, but that's just a general idea. So then, simple words, gracias. Gracias means thank you. Me llamo, my name is. Okay? So that should take us to kind of get an idea of how to greet people based on the time of day. According to the time of day, we've learned to ask somebody for their name. Well, no, we haven't done that as yet, but we've learned to say our name. One of the ways to say our name, but we're going to get into that a little bit further. So the next thing is ejercicio para escuchar, leer y hablar. Read and listen to the dialogues again. Practice them with your classmate. Listen to the song on the CD and sing along. Okay? So replace Conchita's name with yours. All right? So here we go.
Vamos a cantar.
Buenos días, ¿cómo estás? ¿Cómo estás? Muy bien, gracias, muy bien, gracias. ¿Y tú qué tal? ¿Y tú qué tal?
Okay, so let's just go through this very quickly. Buenos días. Good morning. ¿Cómo estás? How are you? Now remember, ¿cómo estás? Remember what we said. Estás is used. Is it formal or is it informal? Right. It is actually informal. And what would be the conjugation if we had to go back to the original? It would actually be como tú estás. You can put the tú or you don't have to put the tú. That's the beauty of Spanish. Okay? So you could say, ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo estás? Oops, there. Or you could say, ¿Cómo tú estás? Or you could say, ¿Cómo estás tú? Remember the accents on each. So all of these three things actually mean the same thing. Whether you decide to include the tú or you take it out completely and just say, ¿Cómo estás? They mean the same thing. All right? Some people actually choose to put the to, and I would actually encourage you to put the to when you're writing it because it helps you remember what conjugated form of the verb that you're going to use. Okay? So if I say, how do you say how are we? You say como nosotros estamos. Okay? You can write como estamos, which is fine. But if you write como nosotros estamos, or you write como nosotros, and you're like, what's the conjugation for nosotros? What's the conjugation for nosotros? What's the conjugation for nosotros? You go back to the chat, you're like, nosotros is estamos. Okay? So it kind of helps you learn the Spanish as we go along by writing it out fully or even speaking it fully. As you get to a point further along the line, you can drop the to if you so desire. So the response for como estás, how are you, is muy bien gracias, muy bien gracias. It means very well, thank you. ¿Y tú? ¿Qué tal? As we said, y tú is how you kind of redirect it. In Spanish, y means and tú, as we said with the accent, it means you. ¿Qué tal? So it's like, muy bien gracias, ¿y tú? ¿Qué tal? So, very well, thank you. And you? How about you? Remember, ¿qué tal is what? ¿Qué tal is asking somebody how they're doing, but it is also informal. That's right. All right, so let's go to the second part of the
Track 5.
Vamos a cantar.
Mi nombre es Conchita, Conchita, Conchita. Yo me llamo Conchita. ¿Cómo te llamas tú?
Okay, so this one is actually pretty nice. She said, mi nombre es Conchita, Conchita, Conchita. Yo me llamo Conchita. ¿Cómo te llamas tú? So as we see here, there are actually two ways that Conchita is introducing herself. She said, mi nombre es Conchita, which literally translates to my name is Conchita. Nombre in Spanish means name, and es is a conjugation of the verb ser, but we'll get into that in a bit. So my name is Conchita. Conchita, Conchita. Yo me llamo Conchita. As we said that earlier, you can also introduce yourself by saying me llamo, which is pretty much I call myself Conchita. So just to remember, you could introduce yourself by saying mi nombre es Conchita. My name is Conchita. You could say yo me llamo Conchita. I call myself Conchita. Or you could even say, yo soy Conchita. I am Conchita. We're going to get to that. But just to keep that in mind, write that down, take note. There are three ways to introduce yourself. Mi nombre es, yo me llamo, and yo soy. Okay? Here's a quick tip. If somebody were to say, like, remember that question right here? For Conchita's question. ¿Cómo te llamas tú? What verb is being used in that question? I'm not sure if I said it earlier, but como in Spanish with the accent, it means how. All right? So this question is saying, how do you call yourself? The verb in that question is actually, well, the conjugated form of the verb is llamas. What is the actual verb? The verb is actually llamar. L-L-A-M-A-R, which means, we said it earlier, to call. All right? To call. There's also a version of the verb llamar that is actually being used there. It's actually called llamarse. Llamarse. It means to call oneself. How is llamarse conjugated? Sure, let's do it. Llamarse is actually conjugated yo. Let's put it here. Llamarse. Write this down. To call oneself. Oneself. I feel like I spelled that wrong, but that's fine. So yo me llamo. Tú te llamas. Él, ella, usted se llama. Nosotros nos llamamos. And ellos, ellas, ustedes se llaman. Okay? So if it was just the normal verb llamar, we would say yo llamo, tú llamas, él, ella, usted llama, nosotros llamamos, ellos, ellas, or ustedes llaman. But we're not just saying call. We're saying to call one's self. So yo me llamo, I call myself. Tú te llamas, you call yourself. Él, ella, usted, he, she, or formal you, call yourself. Nosotros nos llamamos, we call ourselves. Ellos, ellas, ustedes se llaman, they call themselves. So for example, if you were to go you meet like a group of people, and you're like you want to ask them, like it's a group, a dance group, you want to ask them how do they call themselves, plural. So you're gonna be using ustedes. So como ustedes, and how do we look for it? Right here, se llaman. Como ustedes se llaman? How do you guys call yourselves? And they would respond, nosotros nos llamamos Blue Man Group, for example. I was looking for a group. So as we see here, the question was placed. She said, yo me llamo Conchita. ¿Cómo te llamas tú? So remember the ¿Cómo te llamas tú? So in Spanish, like I said, generally a question would have a verb. So in this case, we see ¿Cómo te llamas? We're thinking, what verb is that? Is it the verb llamar or is it the verb llamarse? It's actually the verb llamarse. So we would respond using the me conjugation form. So she would say, yo me llamo Conchita. All right. So now we've kind of figured out how to understand how to ask somebody the name and how it is that we introduce ourselves. So that's one way to ask somebody what is the name. You can also ask them ¿Cuál es tu nombre? ¿Cuál es tu nombre? But we'll get to that after this next conversation, which would give us a little bit more clarification. So we're moving on to Diálogo 4.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
¿Cómo te llamas?
Me llamo Miguel. ¿Y tú? ¿Cómo te llamas?
Me llamo Eduardo. Mucho gusto.
Encantado.
Okay, so as we see in this conversation, very simple. Buenas tardes, buenas tardes. What time of day do you think these guys met each other? Is it the morning, is it the afternoon, or is it the evening? For those who said the afternoon, correct, because buenas tardes. One thing to remember is that when greeting in the morning, buenos dias is the only one, and I want to zoom it in quickly, a little bit closer. Buenos dias is actually the only one that has an O. So buenos dias. As you can tell, here is actually buenas tardes and buenas noches. So at least if you ever forget, just remember that the O is only for the morning. Buenos dias. The rest are buenas tardes and buenas noches. So all you have to remember is just how to say morning, afternoon, and night, which is dia, tarde, and noche. And then just kind of remember which one has the O for the buenos and which one has the AS for the buenas. And as we said, it's only the dias one that has the OS. So buenos dias, buenas tardes, and buenas noches. All right, so we can see that they greeted each other in the afternoon. Eduardo says, ¿Cómo te llamas? Like I said, in Spanish, when you see como with an accent, it means how. All right, so he says, how do you call yourself? How do you call yourself? Te llamas. Te llamas is from the verb llamarse. So Miguel is going to respond using the same verb llamarse, but conjugated for himself. He would say, yo me llamo Miguel. ¿Y tú? ¿Cómo te llamas? And you? How do you call yourself? And then what verb was used again? Te llamas? Llamarse. So when Eduardo is now going to introduce himself, he's going to use the me conjugation of that verb, me llamo, all right? So, ¿y tú cómo te llamas? Me llamo Eduardo. Mucho gusto. Mucho gusto is a way to tell somebody nice to meet you. Miguel responds by saying encantado. So, in Spanish, let's just break quickly. We're not going to go to the second one as yet. But when you're greeting somebody, or when you've met somebody, you could say mucho gusto. Mucho gusto goes around the board. Mucho gusto, mucho gusto, mucho. You're meeting a guy, you say mucho gusto. You're meeting a girl, you say mucho gusto. If you're a guy, you say mucho gusto. If you're a female, you say mucho gusto when meeting somebody. However, for the encantado, this is very important. For the encantado, it depends on the person speaking. So, if you are a guy, no matter who you meet, you will always say encantado because you are enchanted. The word encantado actually comes from the verb encantar, which means to enchant. Okay? So when you say encantado, it means enchanted. But it has to be direct. It has to be speaking of somebody. Who's enchanted? Is it a boy or is it a girl? In your case, you're a boy. You're enchanted to meet somebody, so you say encantado. If it was a female who was enchanted to meet somebody, she would say encantada. So just remember, for you guys, whenever you meet somebody, you say encantado when you're meeting the person by yourself as a singular man. If you're a group of men, that a new speaker, let's say a new speaker comes in and then the speaker introduces themselves and you now have to say nice to meet you to the speaker, you would respond encantados because it's a group of males that are speaking to the person. The same way, if it's a group of females and then a speaker comes on and then you're like, nice to meet you, and then the speaker says nice to meet you, and then the group of girls responds nice to meet you, they would say encantadas. Okay? If it's a mixed group of boys and girls, they would say encantados. So whether it's 100 gal, one man, or 1,000 gal, one man, you would say encantados. Okay? As long as there's a guy in the group, you say encantados. So, mucho gusto is all around the board. It doesn't matter if you're male, if you're female, you say mucho gusto. Alright? And then, for the encantado or encantada, it actually depends if it's singular, plural, male or female. Alright? Another way that you can respond is if somebody says mucho gusto, you can actually respond by saying el gusto es mío. The way that it is broken up is that gusto in Spanish means pleasure, and mucho, who knows what mucho means? Yeah, mucho means much or a lot. So pretty much, he's like, me llamo Eduardo, mucho gusto. My name is Eduardo, much pleasure. You could respond by saying el gusto es mío. What do you think that means? El gusto es mío. It means the pleasure is mine. So you could write that down as a response to respond to mucho gusto. All right. So let's move on to the second part of the dialogue.
Dos.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
Mi nombre es Conchita. ¿Cuál es tu nombre?
Mi nombre es Ana.
Mucho gusto.
Encantada.
So as we see here in this example, Conchita actually did not use the question that we learned earlier, the verb llamarse. She said, ¿cuál es tu nombre? So that's another way to ask somebody the name. You could say, ¿cómo te llamas? You could also say, ¿cuál es tu nombre? ¿Cuál in Spanish? Oh boy. ¿Cuál in Spanish, with the accent, it means which. So this question pretty much means, which is your name? We won't say ¿qué es tu nombre? Because that would not be grammatically correct. We'd actually say ¿cuál es tu nombre? And the way that Spanish works is that we would say ¿cuál because we're choosing it from a bunch of things that can exist. I'll have to explain that a little bit more in class. But just remember, when you're asking somebody the name, just learn the question, ¿cuál es tu nombre? Now, I'm not sure if you noticed, but here, you're not going to see an accent on the tu. The reason being is when you have a tu with an accent, it means you. All right? When you have tu without the accent, it's usually possessive and it means your. All right? So just for an example, if this had an accent on top of it, this would be wrong because it would read, what is you name? That doesn't make any sense. What is you name? Doesn't make any sense. So we actually remove this and it's actually ¿cuál es tu nombre? The nombre belonging to the person. So you say tu nombre, your name, tu nombre, without the accent. All right, so ¿cuál es tu nombre? And she responds by saying, mi nombre es Ana. So note as well, she says, mi nombre es. Me meaning my. All right. For possession, we actually use verbs like me or miss, which is for plural, which means mine. Tu or tus, which means yours. Note, no accent on the tu, no accent on the tus. Very important. In fact, let me even highlight that. And I think that that's something that you need to put into your books. Highlight that there's no accent on the tu and no accent on the tus. Because if there was an accent, it would mean you. All right. Moving along. There's su or sus, which is singular for his, hers, or yours formal, and the sus would be plural, so his, hers, or yours plural. Sus can also mean theirs as well, but we'll get to that. So me, tu, su, sus, which means his, hers, yours. Respectfully, respect. We have for the hours, it actually breaks down into nuestro or nuestra for singular. Now for the nuestro, it depends on if it's a masculine object or a feminine object. And there's also nuestros, and nuestras, if it's plural, masculine or feminine. So for example, if I'm talking about a book, a libro, nuestro libro. If I'm saying my book, mi libro. If I'm saying my, let me see, my pen, mi bolígrafo. If I'm saying my house, mi casa. It doesn't matter if it's male or female. Once you're saying it's yours, mi. Mi nombre, mi casa, mi bolígrafo, mi libro. Tu nombre, tu casa, tu bolígrafo, tu libro. It doesn't matter if it's male or female. Su bolígrafo, su casa, su libro. All right, it doesn't matter if it's masculine or feminine, but it matters if it's singular. And we're talking about bolígrafos, mis bolígrafos, tus casas, sus libros. Okay, so be mindful that for mine, yours, his, hers, yours formal or theirs, it depends on if the word is singular or plural. All right, but for ours, it depends on if it actually matters if it's masculine, feminine, or singular or plural. So nuestro libro, our book, nuestra casa, our house. But we're talking plural now. So nuestros libros, nuestras casas. So just be mindful in terms of when it comes to belonging. So, ¿cuál es tu nombre? What is your name? She responded by saying, mi nombre es. So he said, tu nombre without the accent means yours and mine. So you don't say your nombre es. Your nombre doesn't make sense. Yo means I. You're not going to say, I name is Anna. That doesn't make sense. You say, my name is Anna. Mi nombre es. So be mindful of that because some students have actually made the mistake of putting your nombre es. Yo means I. Tu with the accent means, it means you. All right. Tu without the accent means what? Means yo. All right. As we see, Anna responded by saying, well, first Conchita said mucho gusto. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you're male or female, you say mucho gusto. But Anna, on the other hand, responded by saying encantada, because Anna is female. Like I said before, excuse me, if a man is enchanted to meet somebody, he will always say encantado. If a woman is enchanted to meet somebody, she will say encantada all the time. Okay. So as you can see, there are two ways to ask somebody their name. You can say, ¿Cómo te llamas? To answer that question, they say, me llamo. You can also say, ¿Cuál es tu nombre? And you answer that question by saying, mi nombre es. Okay, as we spoke about earlier. If you want to tell somebody your name, you can also use two answers above, me llamo and mi nombre es. We spoke about that as well. Did you notice that Miguel said encantado and Ana said encantada? This is because in general, words that end with O are masculine and words that end with A are feminine. All right, so we spoke about that earlier. Words that end with O generally in Spanish are masculine. Words that end with A generally are feminine. So the word used will match the gender of the person. Like I said, boy, happy to meet somebody will say encantado. Girl happy to meet somebody will say encantada. Group of boys, encantados is what they will say. And for a group of girls, they'll say encantadas. Trick question. If it's a mixed group of people, what will they say? If it's a mixed group of people, they will say encantados. All right? As long as there's one male in the group, like I say, 100 gal, one man, 1,000 gal, one man. As long as there's a man in the group, use encantados. All right? So, diálogo 5, despedidas. All right? Despedidas is pretty much how you tell somebody. Well, despedidas in Spanish is pretty much goodbyes. All right? So we learned how to tell somebody hello, how to greet ourselves. Saludos. Saludos is actually greetings, and despedidas is actually goodbyes. All right, so let's move on to this diálogo quickly.
Despedidas.
Hasta pronto. Hasta pronto.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego. Hasta mañana.
Hasta mañana.
Adiós. Hasta la vista, amigos.
All right, so I'm sure everybody's kind of familiar with the hasta la vista. That's what Arnold Schwarzenegger used in The Terminator. They say, hasta la vista, baby. Anyway, it's probably before your time. So, as we see here, despedidas or goodbyes. You could say hasta pronto. So, the word hasta in Spanish means until. All right? Hasta. And then pronto actually means soon. So we're pretty much saying it doesn't really make much sense, but the phrase hasta pronto is like, until soon. Until soon. And try not to translate it directly, but it's like saying, see you soon. Hasta luego is until, but the word luego means later. So it's almost like see you later. Hasta mañana. Mañana actually means tomorrow or the morning. So it says hasta mañana. So until tomorrow. And hasta la vista, los amigos. Hasta la vista, amigos. Until la vista. La vista is to see. So until we see again. All right. Hasta la vista, pretty much in layman's terms, the best way I can say hasta la vista is pretty much means we go see. Adios until we see again. Or, we go see. MCA. We go see. Adios, hasta la vista. All right. So in Spanish, amigo is friend, amiga is friend, but amigo is for a male friend, amiga is for a female friend. Do not forget your articles. All right. El amigo, la amiga. I don't want people saying la amigo because this is wrong. La amigo is wrong and el amiga is wrong. Okay. So if it's la, remember la ends with an A, so the corresponding conjugation for the word should be a. So la amiga, el amigo. Careful not to say lo amigo, because some people are like, oh well, la is L-A, amiga, so for amigo it must be L-O. No, it's el amigo. All right. Pay very careful attention. In Spanish, the articles are el or la. El if it's singular masculine, la if it's singular feminine. Los if it's plural masculine, las if it's plural feminine. All right. Hasta la vista or hasta mañana means until tomorrow. Adios is goodbye. Hasta pronto is see you later, and hasta luego is see you later. Hasta pronto is see you soon, and hasta luego is see you later. So we're gonna move to el alfabeto. All right. Track number 9.
Track 9.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, Ñ, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Las vocales A, E, I, O, U.
So in the Spanish alphabet, unlike the English alphabet, which has 26 letters in the English alphabet, The Spanish alphabet actually has 27 letters. The extra letter is actually Nye. I actually highlighted it. Nye. All right. It is the extra letter in the Spanish alphabet. So as we saw after that, las vocales. What do you guys think las vocales means? It actually means the vowels. Las vocales. All right. So as we see the alphabet, the vowels are A, E, A, B, C, D, I, O, U. All right. In Spanish, it's A, E, I, O, U, but in English, sorry, it's A, E, I, O, U, but in Spanish, it's A, E, I, O, U. Careful, because a lot of people, you see between the E and the I, let me see if I can highlight this a little bit better. Between the A, the E, and the I, people tend to have a little bit of confusion. In Spanish, it's very easy to remember that O is O. It pretty much pronounces as O, as we can see here. Where is it? O pronounces as O. U is actually pronounced O-O, which is U. U as in like moon or, U. But for the A, the E, and the I, people get this confused because A in Spanish is pronounced A. The E is actually pronounced A. And the I is actually pronounced E. Right? So what happens, what I have noticed throughout my time is that people will say A in English when they're saying the alphabet, but then when you tell them A in Spanish, they're actually thinking the letter A in English. When you tell them E in Spanish, they're actually thinking the letter E in English. Remember, when doing Spanish letters, Spanish alphabet, A, and I need you guys to write down this entire table in your book. All right, this entire alphabet table. Please write it down exactly as it is in the in your notebooks, with the way that the words are pronounced at the side of it. Okay. So just remember, and it takes practice. It does take practice to go through your vowels, to go through them. So A, E, O, U. All right. There's no other way to get you to remember it than to go through it constantly. So write the alphabet as is, but also write a little section for the vowels. Okay. So if you're not a vowel, you're a consonant. In Spanish, it's las consonantes. So remember, las vocales y las consonantes. All right. So moving on. So, ejercicio para leer y escribir. Complete the following sentences with the appropriate words from the box below. All right, I'm going to do the first one and the last one. You guys can do the rest, okay? Hola, me dash Maria. What is Maria trying to say? I think Maria is trying to introduce herself. Me dash. What verb is she trying to use in this case? I think she's trying to use the verb llamarse. You guys think so? So if she's using the verb llamarse, she would actually be saying, hola, yo me llamo. Remember, I said you can add the yo or not add the yo, but for ease of purpose, we're going to use the o. Ease of understanding. So, hola, yo me something Maria. Llamarse. Yo me something. What is that thing? Yo me llamo Maria. Okay? So, yo me llamo. And we can just cross it out here. I'll do the last one. Como dash Senora Vasquez. Como, remember, is asking, so it's how. Senora Vasquez. Is that a friend? Is that a family member? Is that somebody in authority? Senora means Mrs. So if you're going to use Senora in the, usually Mrs. or an older woman, you're going to use Senora in the person's name, and that means that it's somebody of respect. So how would you respond? Como something. You want to ask them, how are they doing? What is the way to do it? This would actually be usted. Remember, usted is for people who are in authority, people that we respect, but we're doing it formally. What would we say? So we'd actually use, let me let me narrow it down for you guys. We're going to use either this or this. Which one of the two are we going to use? We're actually going to use está. ¿Cómo está, Señora Vasquez? And remember, the accent is extremely important. We're going to talk about the accent in a further chapter, but remember, the accent is important. Let me see if you guys remember. Which conjugation of the verb estar does not have an accent? See if you guys remember. But I'll scroll back up to it just in case you don't remember. It is actually the nosotros conjugation. All right? As you see, well, yeah, because the yo uses estoy, so we're not going to count that. As you see, tú has estás with an accent. I said está with an accent, and ustedes, ellos están with an accent. All right, just remember, nosotros estamos without the accent. Generally in Spanish, when you're conjugating a verb in the we form, the nosotros form, it doesn't have an accent. All right. Ejercicio para hablar. Practice the dialogue below. Work in pairs. One person asks the question while the other person responds in Spanish. Exchange roles afterwards. So we'll do this in class, but practice this at home. I want you guys to practice this. Buenos días, and how would you respond? ¿Cómo estás? Muy bien, ¿y tú? All right. ¿Cómo estás? Muy bien, ¿y tú? But remember, you can also say estás is from the verb. What verb is this? The verb is estar. So you can actually say yo estoy muy bien, ¿y tú? All right. So the person asking, how are you doing? So you respond. Oops. So you respond accordingly. ¿Cómo te llamas? Te llamas, from the verb llamarse. So you respond, yo me llamo. Like I said, you don't have to write it, but at this stage, practice writing the yo, which means I. It'll help you remember the conjugations a little bit better. So yo me llamo, whatever. Mucho gusto, hasta pronto, amigo or amiga. All right. Let's see if you can respond here using the form encantar. What would you say here to respond? You can respond to mucho gusto by saying encantado. That's fine. Oops, I said the answer, but that's fine. So, ¿cómo se escribe? How do you write? All right. So, dice, ¿cómo se escribe tu nombre? Se escribe Anabela. A-N-A-B-E-L-A. Anabela. In Spanish, well, they say ¿cómo se escribe?, which is how do you write? All right. How do you write? So escribir is actually the verb to write. Okay. Now, in this case, if you were to ask somebody ¿cómo se escribe tu nombre?, I would honestly expect the person to respond by actually writing it, not by spelling it. If you wanted to ask them how do you spell your name, you say ¿cómo se deletrea? All right, ¿cómo se deletrea? The verb to spell in Spanish, to spell, is deletrear. Make sure I get that right. Deletrear. All right. So we're moving now on to the ejercicio para escuchar y hablar. Listen as the students pronounce and spell lesson names. Can you say which name is the correct one? All right. It's a good exercise.
Track 10.
Castaña. C-A-S-T-A-Ñ-A.
Arroyo. A-R-R-O-Y-O.
Díaz. D-I-A-Z.
Jiménez. J-I-M-E-N-E-Z.
Salazar. S-A-L-A-Z-A-R.
Cruz. C-R-U-Z.
So I want you guys to notice something. When she said her name, she didn't say Castana. She said Castaña. All right. So that already gives you an indication as to what spelling she would have used, because she pronounced the letter N, Castaña. You see? So that's the other letter in the Spanish alphabet. Another thing to note for the second one, he said arroyo. Arroyo. All right. So in Spanish, generally, when you hear the R sound extremely rough, it's usually in most cases that it's a double R. So if it was the other one, it would have been arroyo. But this one is arroyo. Or arroyo. All right. Now, it could have also been LL because remember, like I said, like llamar. When you have a LL, it actually makes the Y sound. You wouldn't say lamar, you'd say llamar. So in this case, you'd have to kind of listen very closely to know if it's arroyo or arroyo or arroyo. Sorry, when I say the LL, I pronounce it as a J. But it's usually pronounced like a Y. Arroyo. So arroyo. We have Diaz. As you see, Diaz. When there is an accent on a letter, it's usually more pronounced. So for example, when we went to the next one that said Jimenez. Listen to it. Jimenez. It wasn't Jimenez. Or it wasn't if this accent was not here, it would actually be Jimenez. Jimenez. But because not even Jimenez, but because the accent is there, you actually pronounce, so it would be Jimenez. 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 It wasn't for it would be Jimenez. Yeah. But just be mindful that generally, whenever you hear that there is like a stress on a point, it usually that's where the accent is. So Diaz, the accent is on the I. It's not just Diaz. It's Diaz. All right. Jimenez. All right. So practice with a friend. Spelling your name and surname. Go around the class introducing yourself and asking names of the different students. So practice this at home. Guys, I really, really, really want you guys to practice saying your name at home. This is something that I will be grading you guys on throughout the semester and constantly asking you guys about. So practice how to spell your name and introduce yourself and spelling your name. All right? First name and last name. All right? Ejercicio para leer y escribir. Answer the following questions in the spaces provided. You guys can do this. I'm not even going to go through this right now because we did this so many times. Ejercicio para escribir. Use one sentence to respond in Spanish to the following situations. It is 9 o'clock. Text your friend, greeting him or her, asking how he or she is. Went through that. You're greeting them based on the time of day. You're asking them how are they. And it's a friend. So you're going to use the informal. There's a new student in your class and you want to make friends. Write a note you pass to him or her, introducing yourself and find out about him or her. So I'm assuming that you'll say hi, so hola, or in the case where it's a stranger, you say buenos dias, buenas tardes, buenas noches, fine. You introduce yourself, so you'd say, my name is, whichever one you want to say, you can say mi nombre es, you can say yo soy, you could even say the last one, which is me llamo, yo me llamo. And then you find out about him or her. So how would you do that? Hey, how you doing? What's your name? What's your name? How you doing? Whichever one, all right? But because the person is not familiar to you, you're going to use the formal one. All right, so practice that. Write the note that he or she passes back to you, responding to your question, expressing pleasure to meet you. All right, so for argument's sake, let's say the new student is a female. You know what, do one for both. New student is a male, new student is a female. All right, here's a little verse to help you practice your vowels, and this is the last track.
Buenos días por la mañana. Buenas tardes por la tarde. Buenas noches por la noche. Hola, 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 a toda hora. ¿Cómo estás? Bien, gracias. ¿Qué tal? Muy bien, gracias.
Friends and family, you use hola for. Just remember, if you're not too sure what time of day it is or whatever, you just say hola. Hola is the easy way out. Just like mucho gusto. Mucho gusto is the easy way out. But it's good to know the more complicated version. So remember what time of day. Remember, it's buenos for the días, buenas for the tardes, and buenas for the noches. And then remember, it's encantado if you are the male speaking, encantada if a female is speaking, she will say encantada, encantados if it's a group of males or a mixed group, and encantadas if it's a group of females, plural. ¿Cómo estás? Bien, gracias. That's how you respond. ¿Qué tal? Muy bien, gracias. Another way you can respond to ¿Cómo estás? We said it many times. We'll go over it again. ¿Cómo estás? You identify the verb. This is the conjugation. So let's see. What form of this verb is actually being asked? It's actually the to form. ¿Cómo tú estás? Remember the accent. So what verb is being asked? The verb estar. So you can say, bien, gracias. Fill in the blanks. All right. So when Hispanic persons greet each other, they embrace and kiss each other on the cheek. Men also shake hands. The type of greeting used also depends on the relationship between the persons who are meeting each other. If the person being greeted is not a friend, relative, or someone fairly close, the greeting is more formal. Buenas tardes means both good afternoon and good evening. Okay. Some people use buenas tardes for the afternoon and the evening. Some people use buenas noches. Well, buenas noches is usually for the night. That's true. So buenas tardes is usually the afternoon or the evening. And buenas noches is once it's dark. Nighttime. Crickets and everything. All right. So this concludes chapter 1 of book 1. Hopefully we can get the chapters to be a little faster going forward, but that's pretty much it. Okay, guys, if you have any questions, any comments, post them in the Google Classroom. So we're taking it one step at a time. All right.